Nolan Davis stood before the obsidian lectern, the cold, sterile air of the Xylosian judgment hall doing little to cool the frantic pounding in his chest, his worn smuggler's jacket feeling paper thin against the gazes of the assembled alien dignitaries. The very air hummed with an ancient, inflexible power, each crystalline facet of the immense chamber reflecting not light but the weight of immutable law. It offered no solace, this sterility, only amplifying his profound isolation, the sheer, crushing gravity of his decision. Before him, on a floating dais, lay the silent, small form of Prince Theron, the Iridian Empress's only heir, his life signs indicators on the nearby display flickering a desperate, fading crimson. Not far from the dais, Empress Lita, a figure of usually unshakable regality, was a study in shattered composure, her shoulders racked by silent sobs, her form gently but firmly restrained by two stoic, grey-clad attendants who seemed impervious to her grief. And on the lectern, the soul-binding contract pulsed with a faint, hungry light, awaiting the only payment the Xylosians would accept for the forbidden chronostasis technology that could save him. 10 years of Nolan's life, memories, and service, everything that made him him. 10 years, a chasm of future experiences, of past recollections, of the very essence of his being, about to be carved out. The price was a living death. His gaze flickered almost involuntarily to the fading crimson light by Theron's still form, then to the Empress, her anguish a raw, open wound in the sterile hall. The sight, her pain, his sacrifice, it all coalesced. A grim certainty settled over him, extinguishing the last flicker of hesitation. He drew a breath that felt like ground glass, then straightened, his worn jacket settling around him. His nod to the towering Xylosian official presiding by the lectern was sharp, concise, an undeniable signal of his consent. There was no turning back. The official inclined its multifaceted head a mere fraction, an acknowledgment as chill and precise as a shard of ice. The soul-binding contract on the lectern flared, its hungry light suddenly intense, almost blinding. Steeling himself, Nolan reached out, placing his palm flat against the device's strangely warm surface. A searing cold, a paradoxical burn, shot up his arm as tendrils of pure, white energy, too bright to look at directly, erupted from the contract, wrapping around his hand, his wrist, instantly binding him to its alien mechanic. The instant the energy enveloped Nolan's arm, a silent signal seemed to pass. 2 other Xylosian attendants, moving with a swift, dispassionate grace, were already at the dais. They lifted Prince Theron's small, limp body with an unnerving gentleness that was more procedural than compassionate, turning to carry him towards a shadowed archway from which a low thrum of power emanated. As the small prince disappeared, Nolan felt the floor shift. A dizzy spell hit him, so strong he swayed, his hand grabbing the edge of the lectern. It wasn't just dizziness, it was a profound wrenching, a distinct chilling sensation of something vital being ripped from his mind, a specific skill, a cherished memory, he couldn't tell which. Only that a space within him was suddenly, shockingly, empty. Through the haze of his own disorientation, Nolan saw Empress Lita's head snap up. Her eyes, wide and haunted, followed her son until he vanished. Then, her gaze found Nolan, clinging to the lectern. The flicker of desperate hope for Theron that had briefly illuminated her face died, extinguished by a dawning horror as she registered Nolan's pallor, his unsteadiness. Relief, terror, and a crushing, sorrowful gratitude warred in her expression, tears now streaming, unchecked, down her face. The presiding Xylosian's voice, when it came, was like the grinding of tectonic plates, ancient, powerful, and utterly devoid of emotion. The soul-binding contract is sealed. The terms are met. The Iridian heir will receive the chronostasis. The transaction is concluded. Each word fell like a stone into the vast silence of the hall. Nolan gritted his teeth, fighting to stay upright as another wave of excision tore through him. Then another. It was like his mind was a tapestry being unraveled thread by thread. Precious memories, hard-won skills, even fragments of his personality, dissolving into nothingness. The sheer scale of the loss was a physical blow, leaving him gasping, acutely aware of his sudden, profound vulnerability. This was the price, paid in the currency of his soul, and the first installment was already devastating. Nolan's knees buckled, the obsidian floor rushed up to meet him, cold and unyielding against his cheek. The resonant hum of the judgment hall faded into a muffled roar, replaced by a frantic pounding in his own ears. He gasped, trying to draw air into lungs that felt suddenly constricted. Vaguely he registered hands, alien hands, gentle but firm, lifting him. Voices speaking in rapid, clipped tones he couldn't quite decipher. Empress Lita's face swam into focus above him, her amber eyes etched with concern. "Attend to him. Immediately," she commanded, her voice carrying a regal authority that cut through the lingering disorientation. "Ensure his comfort, monitor his vital signs. Standard protocols are secondary. Prioritize his well-being." She watched as palace medics, clad in shimmering silver uniforms, efficiently moved him onto a hovering gurney. He awoke in a room bathed in soft violet light. The walls were smooth and curved, constructed from a material that seemed to absorb sound. It was comfortable, luxurious even, but utterly unfamiliar. He sat up, a wave of dizziness washing over him. Where was he? Who was he? Fragments of memories flickered a freighter's cramped cockpit, the sting of ozone from a plasma discharge, the weight of a blaster in his hand, but they were disjointed, like shards of a broken mirror. The door hissed open, and Lita entered, her expression a careful blend of gratitude and apprehension. "Nolan," she said softly, approaching the bed. "How are you feeling?" She paused, studying him intently. Do you remember?" He frowned, struggling to grasp something just beyond his reach. "Remember what?" My ship, the Stardust Drifter. I had a compartment behind the nav console. Code, encrypted codes." He trailed off, the memory dissolving like smoke. A wave of frustration washed over him, leaving him weak and trembling. A low chime sounded, and a medic entered, carrying a small device that emitted a faint, pulsating glow. "Your Majesty," the medic said, bowing slightly. "The neurological scan is complete." The medic approached Nolan, gently placing the device against his temple. Coolness spread through his skull, followed by a series of rapid clicks and whirs. Lita turned to the medic, her voice tight with anticipation. "The results?" "Unusual energy signatures, Your Majesty," the medic replied, consulting a small datapad. "Neural pathways disrupt, consistent with the Xylosian soul barter technology, but the extent of the damage is significant. Long-term prognosis is uncertain. Complete memory or skill recovery cannot be guaranteed." Lita's expression darkened. She turned back to Nolan, her eyes filled with a mixture of pity and tenacity. The gravity of his sacrifice settled heavier on her shoulders. He swung his legs over the side of the bed, ignoring the lingering dizziness. He needed to do something, to prove he wasn't completely useless. He spotted a datapad on a nearby table, its surface glowing with Iridian script. He reached for it, instinctively knowing he should be able to access its contents. His fingers danced over the controls, attempting to input a familiar sequence, a simple override code he'd used countless times. But the symbols swam before his eyes, meaningless and alien. He fumbled, his hands shaking, until finally the datapad emitted a frustrated beep and locked him out. He hit his fist on the table, a strangled cry escaping his lips. Damn it! I should know this. It's basic. Lita rushed to his side, placing a gentle hand on his arm. Nolan, it's all right. Don't push yourself. You've been through a great deal. We'll find ways to compensate. I promise you, you will have everything you need to adapt. Her touch was warm, reassuring, a lifeline in the swirling chaos of his mind. The door chimed again, and a tall, elegant Iridian entered, his face etched with polite concern. Your Majesty, he said, bowing deeply, I trust our guest is recovering comfortably. He cast a sidelong glance at Nolan, his expression carefully neutral. I must express my concern regarding the security implications of housing a civilian within the palace, especially given the sensitive nature of Prince Theron's condition. Lita's eyes flashed with anger. Counselor Varys, she said, her voice cold and sharp. Nolan Davis is under my protection. He is owed a debt that can never be repaid. His presence here is not a matter for debate. Is that understood? Varys bowed again, his face impassive. Perfectly, Your Majesty. I merely wished to express my concern for the safety and well-being of the Empire. He paused, his gaze lingering on Nolan for a moment longer, before turning and exiting the room. Lita watched him go, her teeth clenched, sensing the underlying disapproval and political maneuvering beneath his carefully chosen words. A sudden image flashed through Nolan's mind, a dark alleyway, the glint of a knife, a desperate struggle, a woman's scream. He gasped, clutching his head, his vision blurring. He saw himself, younger, more reckless, failing to intervene, failing to save her. The memory was fleeting, fragmented, but the guilt was sharp and visceral. Lita knelt beside him, her voice filled with concern. Nolan, what is it? What do you see? She gently wiped the sweat from his brow, her touch soothing and grounding. It's all right. You're safe now. Lita straightened, a flicker of hope in her eyes. The chronostasis field is stable. His life signs are strengthening. The Xylosian technology. It's working. A small, fragile victory amidst the overwhelming uncertainty. Nolan looked at Lita, his eyes filled with a desperate longing. I need to know, he said, his voice hoarse. What did I lose? What am I now? What skills, what memories are gone? He needed to understand the extent of the damage, to begin the long, arduous process of rebuilding himself. Lita took his hand, her grip firm and reassuring. We'll find out together, Nolan. I promise you, we will. I will open the palace archives to you. I will assign personnel to assist you. We will piece together your past, bit by bit, until you understand who you are, and who you can become. Lita turned to the door and spoke into her corn. Summon Captain Ryler to my private office immediately, and have her bring the full security logs regarding the investigation into Prince Theron's initial ailment. She looked back at Nolan, her expression hardening. I am beginning to suspect that what happened to my son was no accident. Even through the fog of his fragmented memories, Nolan felt a prickling sensation on the back of his neck. The palace, for all its luxury and beauty, felt like a viper's nest, filled with hidden agendas and unspoken tensions. He couldn't explain it, couldn't articulate the feeling, but he knew instinctively that he was surrounded by danger. The burn in his muscles was a dull, unfamiliar ache. Nolan strained against the resistance bands, his arms trembling as he attempted a simple bicep curl. Sweat beaded on his forehead, blurring his vision. It wasn't just the exertion, it was the frustration. He knew how to do this. His body simply refused to cooperate. Lita watched from the doorway, her expression a mixture of concern and encouragement. The soft light of the therapy room illuminated the delicate patterns woven into her silken robes. "It's all right, Nolan," she said, her voice gentle. "Progress takes time. We will adjust the program. More rest, perhaps?" She gestured to a hovering medical bot. "The machine can stimulate the muscle groups directly, if you wish." Nolan lowered his arms, letting the bands snap back into place. "No," he said, his voice raspy. "No machines. I need to remember." Lita approached, her bare feet silent on the polished floor. She placed a hand on his arm, her touch light but firm. "Then we will find a way. I will personally oversee your training regime. We have the best physical therapists in the galaxy at our disposal, and I will ensure they tailor it to your unique circumstances." Later, showered and changed, Nolan ventured out of his quarters. He wanted to explore, to get a sense of this place that was now his home, prison. He wasn't sure. He passed a group of palace staff gathered near a fountain, their voices a melodic hum. He tried to offer a polite greeting, a simple good day, but the words felt clumsy, foreign on his tongue. He couldn't recall the proper Iridian honorifics, the subtle inflections that conveyed respect. A flicker of amusement crossed the face of one of the attendants, a young woman with iridescent scales shimmering on her cheeks. The others stifled giggles. Nolan felt a flush creep up his neck. Lita appeared at his side, her presence radiating authority. She placed a hand on his back, a subtle gesture of reassurance. "My apologies," she said, her voice sharp. "Nolan is still acclimating to our customs. He is under my protection, and any disrespect shown to him will be considered a direct insult to the throne." She turned to Nolan, her expression softening. "Nolan, allow me to introduce you to." She then proceeded to smoothly introduce him, using the correct honorifics and explaining the context of their roles in the palace, subtly educating him and diffusing the awkwardness. As they walked away, a sharp, piercing tone resonated through the palace. Nolan clutched his head, a searing pain exploding behind his eyes. He stumbled, his vision blurring. "Nolan, what is it?" Lita's voice was filled with alarm. "My head, a sound," he gasped, struggling to stay upright. The pain intensified, a throbbing pressure that threatened to overwhelm him. Lita immediately summoned a medical team. "Find the source of that frequency. Now I want a complete diagnostic sweep of the palace. Nothing is to be overlooked." Later, resting in his quarters, the throbbing in his head subsided to a dull ache. Lita sat beside him, her brow furrowed with concern. The doctors found nothing conclusive. A slight increase in neural activity, but nothing that would explain such a reaction. "I've ordered a thorough investigation into the palace's acoustic architecture. We must determine the source of that frequency." He managed a weak smile. "Maybe I'm just allergic to royalty." Lita didn't return the smile. "This is no jesting matter, Nolan. That sound. It affected you in a way that concerns me deeply." Seeking respite from the sterile environment of his quarters, Nolan wandered into the palace gardens. Lush, alien flora bloomed in vibrant colors, their exotic scents filling the air. He paused by a pond, watching iridescent fish dart through the water. "Are you the human who saved Prince Theron?" Nolan turned to see a young Iridian child standing beside him, her amber eyes wide with curiosity. She couldn't have been more than 6 or 7 years old, her delicate features framed by silver braids. I helped," Nolan said, his voice hesitant. "My mother says you are very brave. She says Prince Theron would not be alive if it weren't for you." The child stepped closer, her gaze unwavering. "What is it like to be human? Are you very different from us?" Nolan knelt down, meeting her gaze. "We're not so different," he said, a genuine smile gracing his lips. "We laugh, we cry, we love, just like you." From a distance, Lita watched the interaction, a flicker of warmth in her eyes. She was pleased to see Nolan forming connections within the palace, demonstrating his inherent kindness and empathy. Later that evening, the chief of security, a stern-faced Iridian named Varkas, presented Lita with his initial findings from the investigation into Theron's illness. "Your Majesty, we have uncovered several inconsistencies in the official reports. The levels of the toxin found in Prince Theron's system do not match the initial diagnosis. Furthermore, there are discrepancies in the security logs surrounding the days leading up to his collapse." Lita's expression hardened. "Are you suggesting a cover-up, Varkas?" "It is a possibility, Your Majesty. The evidence is suggestive." "Expand the investigation," Lita ordered, her voice cold. "Focus on individuals with known political rivalries, or potential motives for harming Theron. I want answers, Varkas, and I want them now." Driven by a restless urge to understand his past, Nolan attempted to access the palace's central database. He entered his name and the access codes Lita had provided, but the system denied his request. "Access restricted. Security protocol override required." Frustration welled up inside him. He was a ghost in this place, a stranger in his own skin. He couldn't even access basic information about himself. Lita found him staring at the unyielding screen, his face etched with disappointment. "What is it, Nolan?" "I wanted to research my past," he said, his voice low, "but I don't have the necessary clearance." Lita's expression softened. "That is easily remedied." She accessed the system herself, bypassing the security protocols with a few swift commands. "There, you now have unrestricted access to the database, Nolan. Anything you need, any information you seek, it is yours." She looked at him, her eyes filled with unwavering trust. "And if you need assistance, I will be there to guide you." Nolan spent hours poring over the fragmented records, piecing together glimpses of his former life. He saw images of starships, spaceports, and shadowy figures engaged in clandestine deals. He discovered records of smuggling runs, cargo manifests, and encrypted communication. The picture that emerged was of a morally ambiguous figure, a man who operated on the fringes of society, bending the rules to suit his own purposes. The revelations left him feeling uneasy. Was this the man he truly was? A rogue, a smuggler, a lawbreaker? Lita found him staring at the screen, his face troubled. "What have you discovered, Nolan?" He hesitated, unsure how to explain his conflicting emotions. "My past. It's not exactly pristine. Lita sat beside him, her gaze unwavering. "I am aware of your previous occupation, Nolan. I understand that you have made choices that you may now regret. But I also know that you are not defined by your past. What matters is who you are now and the choices you make in the present." She paused, her expression softening. "Honesty, Nolan, transparency. That is all I ask." He took a deep breath, steeling himself to reveal a truth that had haunted him for years. There was a mission, a smuggling run. We were transporting medical supplies to a colony world ravaged by disease. We were ambushed by pirates. I made a mistake, a miscalculation. One of my crewmates, he died. I could have saved him, but I hesitated. I froze. His voice cracked with emotion. "That failure, it's been with me ever since. That's why I couldn't let Theron die." Lita reached out, taking his hand in hers. Her touch was warm and comforting. "I understand, Nolan. You sought redemption. You saw an opportunity to right a past wrong." She then shared a story about a past political betrayal. "My consort, Theron's father, he was a good man. He trusted the wrong people. They poisoned him, slowly, subtly, using a rare toxin. I was too blind to see it, too trusting. I vowed then that I would do everything in my power to protect Theron. He is all I have left." As Nolan continued to sift through the security logs, a subtle pattern caught his eye. An official, a senior aide named Counselor Zill, had been seen near Theron's room often before his illness. Each time Zill had lingered for an unusually long period, engaging in hushed conversations with the guards. "Lita," Nolan said, his voice urgent, "take a look at this." He pointed to the recurring entries in the security logs. Counselor Zill, he was near Theron's chamber just before he collapsed, multiple times. Lita's eyes narrowed. "Zill, he is a known political rival. He has openly criticized my policies and questioned my leadership. We need to watch him," Nolan said, his voice low, "discreetly. See what he's up to." They began to observe Zyl's behavior, noticing suspicious interactions and covert communications. He met with shadowy figures in secluded corners of the palace, exchanging encrypted messages and furtive glances. Their suspicions solidified. Zill was involved in something nefarious. Suddenly, Lita's datapad chimed, signaling an incoming message. She glanced at the screen, her expression hardening. "It's from Senator Ryler," she said, her voice grim. "She warns of a potential plot to undermine my authority and destabilize the throne. She says I should trust no one." As Lita absorbed the senator's warning, Nolan experienced another vivid flashback. He saw himself in a crowded spaceport, surrounded by a throng of smugglers and traders. He was negotiating a deal, his eyes scanning the crowd, assessing their intentions, detecting subtle tells that betrayed their true motives. He remembered his ability to read people, to see through their deceptions and hidden agendas. The memory surged through him, a forgotten skill resurfacing from the depths of his mind. He looked at Lita, his eyes filled with a newfound grit. "I can help you, Lita," he said, his voice confident. "I know how to spot a liar. I know how to uncover the truth. Engineering and biology." Sean finished, his smile fading as he considered the implications. Lita and Nolan sat hunched over a holographic display in her private study, the cool blue light illuminating their faces. Security logs scrolled across the screen, a dizzying array of data points. He was near Theron's chambers several times in the weeks leading up to the incident, Lita said, her voice tight with controlled anger, her violet eyes narrowed. "And look at this," Nolan pointed. his finger hovering over a series of encrypted communications. Before and after Theron's illness, this courtier Veldar was sending messages using a highly unusual encryption method. Nolan leaned closer, his brow furrowed in concentration. "It's a variant of the Cygnus code," he murmured, a flicker of recognition in his eyes. "Rare and sophisticated, used by a known mercenary group, the Obsidian Blades. Not your average courtier's toolkit." He pulled up a file on the Obsidian Blades, their reputation for ruthless efficiency and discretion preceding them. "They don't come cheap. Someone wanted Theron gone, and they were willing to pay a premium." Lita's heart made. "Summon Veldar. Now." Her voice brooked no argument. The courtier, a slender Iridian with sharp features and an oily demeanor, was brought before them. He stood rigidly, his gaze darting nervously between Lita and Nolan. "You are accused of conspiring against Prince Theron," Lita stated, her voice cold and regal. "These security logs show you were in close proximity to his chambers before his collapse. Furthermore, you have been communicating using a highly sophisticated encryption code." Veldar feigned ignorance, his antennae twitching nervously. "Empress, I am a loyal servant of the Iridian Empire. These are baseless accusations. I was merely carrying out my duties." Nolan stepped forward, his gaze unwavering. He studied Veldar's face, his eyes, the subtle movements of his antennae. "Micro-expressions," he murmured, almost to himself. "The subtle tightening of the eyes when he denies the accusations. The slight flare of his nostrils when Lita mentions the encryption code. He's lying." Nolan had honed this skill during his smuggling days. Reading people was often the difference between life and death. Lita presented Veldar with the evidence of his encrypted communications, the holographic display showing the complex code. "Explain this, Veldar," she demanded, her voice rising. Veldar remained defiant, his face hardening. "I have nothing to say without legal representation. I demand to speak with my advocate." Lita clenched her fist, frustration evident on her face. "He's stalling," she muttered to Nolan. "Iridian law protects him. We can't force him to speak." Nolan stroked his chin, his mind racing. "We can't make him talk, but we can listen. He's bound to contact his co-conspirators. Let's intercept his next communication. See who he's talking to." Lita considered the proposal, her eyes narrowing. "It's risky. If he discovers our surveillance, he'll go silent. But we have few other options." She met Nolan's gaze, a spark of dedication in her eyes. "Very well. I authorize the operation. Captain Ryler, you will assemble a team and assist Nolan in this endeavor. I want Veldar's every move monitored." Under the cover of darkness, Nolan and the security team set up a surveillance operation in the corridors near Veldar's private quarters. They tapped into the palace's communication network, monitoring all outgoing transmissions from Veldar's devices. Hours passed, the silence broken only by the hum of the surveillance equipment. Nolan felt a familiar tension coiling in his gut, a relic from his smuggling days. He trusted his instincts, and his instincts told him Veldar was about to make a move. Suddenly, a burst of encrypted data pulsed through the network. "He's transmitting," a security officer whispered, his voice tight with anticipation. "Activating interception protocols." Nolan watched as the data stream was diverted to his console. The encryption was complex, but he recognized the telltale signs of the Cygnus code. His fingers flew across the keyboard, his knowledge of the mercenaries' methods proving invaluable. "Almost there," he muttered, his brow furrowed in concentration. "Just need to bypass this final layer of obfuscation." With a final keystroke, The message decrypted, revealing its chilling contents. Operation Nightingale compromised. Lita to appear at Unity Plaza tomorrow. Execute contingency, Omega. Lita's face paled as she read the message. They're planning to assassinate me, she whispered, her voice trembling. At Unity Plaza. That's a public appearance. They would have killed countless innocents. Cancel the appearance, Nolan said, his voice firm. And lock down the palace. Increase security at every checkpoint. We can't let them get to you. Lita nodded, her eyes hardening with willpower. Inform the security forces. No one enters or leaves the palace without my express authorization. As the palace went into lockdown, Veldar, realizing his plan had been exposed, attempted to flee his quarters. But Nolan and the security team were waiting for him. Going somewhere, Veldar? Nolan asked, his voice dangerously low. Veldar drew a plasma pistol, his face contorted with rage. You meddling human. You've ruined everything. A brief but intense firefight erupted in the corridor, plasma bolts searing the air. Nolan, drawing on forgotten combat skills, moved with surprising speed and agility, dodging the energy blasts. He returned fire, his shots precise and deadly. He moved to shield Lita, pushing her behind a pillar. The security team quickly subdued Veldar, disarming him and dragging him to the ground. Are you all right? Nolan asked Lita, his eyes scanning her for injuries. Lita nodded, her chest heaving. I'm fine, thanks to you. Again. Veldar was dragged before Lita, his face bruised and bloody. Who are your co-conspirators? Lita demanded, her voice cold and unforgiving. Who ordered you to assassinate me? Veldar spat on the floor, defiance burning in his eyes. I will never betray my comrades. Lita's expression hardened. Take him to the interrogation chamber. Use whatever means necessary to extract the truth. Hours later, the truth emerged, a revelation that sent shockwaves through the palace. Veldar has confessed, Captain Ryler reported to Lita and Nolan, her face grim. He claims he was acting under the orders of Senator Goran, a high-ranking member of the Iridian Council. Lita gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Goran? But he's been a trusted advisor for years. This cannot be true. Veldar provided evidence, Ryler continued. Encrypted data logs, financial records, even a signed confession from Goran himself. He's been plotting to overthrow you and seize power for months. Lita sank into her chair, her face pale with shock. I cannot believe it, she whispered, her voice filled with disbelief. A senator, betraying his Empress, his people. Nolan knelt beside her, taking her hand in his. You're not alone, Lita, he said, his voice gentle but firm. We'll uncover the truth. We'll bring Goran and his co-conspirators to justice. Lita looked at Nolan, her eyes filled with gratitude. Thank you, Nolan, she said, her voice thick with emotion, for everything. You saved my life, Theron's life, and the lives of countless others. You are a true friend, a true ally. Their eyes met, and for a moment the weight of the world seemed to lift. A shared understanding passed between them, a silent acknowledgement of the growing feelings that had been simmering beneath the surface. The electric tension was palpable, a silent promise of something more. Lita took a deep breath, steeling her persistence. We have a senator to expose, she said, her voice regaining its regal tone, and a throne to protect. Goran will not succeed. We will plan a counter-offensive. We will show him and all who plot against us that the Iridian Empire will not be brought down so easily. Of course, that assumes he's driven by logic at all, Nolan finished, pacing the length of Lita's private study. The room, usually a sanctuary of calm blues and greens, felt charged with unspoken tension. Lita steepled her fingers, the light from the crystalline chandelier glinting off her regal braids. Senator Voren has always been ambitious, but treason? Aligning with the Krill? It seems implausible. Nolan stopped pacing, turning to face her. Implausible, perhaps, but not impossible. Power is a strong motivator, Empress, and Voren clearly craves it. He paused, a flicker of something unreadable in his eyes. Besides, sometimes the most obvious answer is the one people overlook. Lita frowned. Are you suggesting? I'm suggesting we consider all possibilities, Nolan said, his voice carefully neutral, including the ones that make us uncomfortable. And if Voren is involved, we need proof. Solid proof. He gestured towards the viewport, the sprawling cityscape of Iridia Prime shimmering in the twilight. Something more than just, he seems ambitious, Lita sighed, the weight of her crown seeming to press down on her shoulders. What do you propose? Nolan's lips quirked, a ghost of his old smuggler's grin. I have acquaintances, people who know things, people who operate outside the bounds of polite society. Lita's brow furrowed. Criminals, Nolan? You're suggesting we involve criminals? Information brokers, Nolan corrected, though his tone held a hint of amusement. Think of them as unofficial investigators. They have access to channels you wouldn't dream of, and they're discreet, mostly. Lita hesitated, her gaze unwavering. I am not comfortable with this, but I trust your judgment. Proceed, but be careful, Nolan. I will not risk you. Her hand briefly covered his where it rested on the edge of her desk. Nolan nodded, a warmth spreading through him at her touch and her concern. Always. The neon-drenched alley reeked of synth spices and desperation. Nolan pulled his collar higher, the shadows clinging to him like a second skin. He found Zara leaning against a flickering holo ad, her reptilian eyes glinting in the artificial light. She was a Kalani, her scales a shifting mosaic of greens and browns, and her reputation for ruthlessness was legendary. Nolan, she hissed, her voice a rasp. Long time. What brings you to my humble abode? Empress trouble? Senator Voren, Nolan said, cutting to the chase. I need information. Anything you have on his dealings, his contacts, his indiscretions. Zara's scaled lips curled into a predatory smile. Information is my business, Nolan, but it doesn't come cheap. You owe me a favor, remember? A big one. Nolan met her gaze unflinchingly. Name it. Zara paused, considering. Not now. I'll call when I need it. But trust me, human, you'll pay. She flicked a data chip towards him with a clawed finger. Everything you need is on there. Arms dealing, Krill connections. Voren's been a busy boy. Nolan caught the chip, his expression grim. Thanks, Zara. I owe you. Don't forget it, she hissed, disappearing back into the shadows. Back in Lita's study, Nolan inserted the data chip into the console. The information that scrolled across the screen was damning. Voren was not only involved in illegal arms dealing, but he was also in contact with a Krill warship, exchanging encrypted messages. Lita's face paled as she read the evidence. He's betraying us, endangering my people for his own gain. Her voice trembled with barely suppressed fury. It appears so, Nolan said, his mind focused. The Krill have been looking for a foothold in this sector for years. Voren's offering them one, in exchange for their support in overthrowing you. Lita slammed her fist on the desk, the crystal surface vibrating. I will not allow it. He will be held accountable. We need more information, Nolan said, his mind already racing. We need to know exactly what Vorin promised the Krill and what they plan to do once they have it. Lita nodded, her eyes blazing with purpose. I will arrange a secret meeting with a Krill representative. Someone discreet, someone who might be willing to talk. The meeting took place in a neutral location, a deserted space station orbiting a gas giant on the fringes of Iridian space. The Krill representative, a towering figure in obsidian armor, regarded them with cold reptilian eyes. Empress Lita, the Krill hissed, its voice a synthesized rasp. Senator Vorin assured us you would be more amenable to negotiation. Senator Vorin is a traitor, Lita said, her voice steely. I am here to find out the extent of his treachery. What did he promise you? The Krill representative paused, its gaze shifting to Nolan. He promised us advanced Iridian technology, weapons, shielding, in exchange for our support in removing you from power. Lita gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. He would give them our technology, our defenses. He would leave us vulnerable. He would do anything for power, the Krill said, its voice devoid of emotion. And now, it seems, his ambitions have led him to ruin. Back on Iridia Prime, Lita paced her study, her face etched with pain. I trusted him, Nolan. I confided in him. He was one of my closest advisors. Nolan stepped forward, placing a hand on her shoulder. You were betrayed, Lita. It happens, but you are not alone. We will expose his plot. We will bring him to justice. Lita looked up at him, her eyes filled with anguish. How could he do this? How could he betray his own people? Nolan squeezed her shoulder gently. People are capable of anything, Lita, especially when power is involved. But you are stronger than him. You are more resilient. You will overcome this. He paused, a sudden wave of dizziness washing over him. He reached for his head, his brow furrowing in confusion. Lita noticed his distress. Nolan? What's wrong? I don't know. He stammered, his voice strained. I can't remember. Something important. He struggled to grasp the fleeting memory, but it slipped through his fingers like sand. It felt like a gap, a hole in his mind, where something vital used to be. Lita's expression softened with concern. It's all right, Nolan. Don't push yourself. Your past does not define you. What matters is who you are now. She reached out, taking his hand in hers. Her touch was warm and reassuring, grounding him in the present. He met her gaze, his heart swelling with gratitude. He leaned down, pressing a gentle kiss to her forehead. Thank you, Lita, for everything. Their eyes met, and for a long moment, the world seemed to fade away. The weight of the conspiracy, the betrayal, the uncertainty of the future. All of it vanished, leaving only the two of them, connected by a bond forged in sacrifice and strengthened by trust. Lita broke the silence, her voice firm. We will confront Vorin. We will present him with the evidence. We will expose his treachery to the world. The confrontation took place in the Iridian Senate chamber, the very heart of Iridian power. Lita stood before the assembled senators, her voice ringing with authority. I have called you here today to reveal a grave betrayal, she announced, her gaze sweeping across the room. Senator Vorin has been plotting against me, conspiring with the Krill to overthrow my reign and endanger our people. Vorin rose to his feet, his face flushed with anger. These are outrageous accusations, Empress. I demand you retract them immediately. I have proof, Senator, Lita said, her voice unwavering. Evidence of your illegal arms dealing, your encrypted communications with the Krill, your promise to provide them with advanced Iridian technology. Vorin scoffed. Fabricated evidence. A desperate attempt to discredit me, to silence my opposition. Nolan stepped forward, his eyes fixed on Vorin. The evidence is real, Senator. We have it from multiple sources, including Zara, your own information broker, and a representative of the Krill. He produced the data chip and displayed the encrypted messages on the holo screen. Vorin's face contorted with rage as he realized he had been exposed. You dare accuse me, a loyal servant of the Iridian people? You, a human, a barbarian. Your words are meaningless, Senator, Lita said, her voice cold. Your actions speak for themselves. Vorin, realizing he was cornered, lunged towards Lita, attempting to seize her. But Nolan was faster. He stepped in front of Lita, blocking Vorin's path. Lita, with a speed that belied her regal appearance, disarmed Vorin and pinned him to the ground. You are under arrest, Senator, she said, her voice ringing with authority. You will be charged with treason. Vorin was dragged away, his political career in ruins. Lita addressed the Iridian people, revealing Vorin's plot and assuring them that justice would be served. As Lita and Nolan celebrated their victory in her private study, a shadowy figure watched them from afar, its eyes glowing with malevolent intent. The figure, cloaked in darkness, whispered a single word, Xylos. Lita stared at the cascading lines of encrypted Krill text shimmering on the holoscreen. This confirms it, Nolan. Senator Varkos was in direct communication with Krill representatives. The dates align with the increased tensions along the neutral zone. Nolan leaned closer, his brow furrowed. The encryption key is sloppy, almost deliberately so. Are we sure this isn't misdirection? Lita's fingers danced across the control panel. The financial transactions are harder to dismiss. Large sums routed through shell corporations, ending up in Varkos's personal accounts. It's treason, plain and simple. She straightened, her regal bearing returning. I want a full investigation into Varkos's associates. Every contact, every transaction. This goes deeper than one rogue senator. Her voice hardened. Seal the records. No one leaves the palace without my express permission. Nolan tapped a finger against his chin, his gaze distant. The Krill representative. His testimony during the trade negotiations. Something about it didn't ring true. Too eager to concede certain points. Almost as if he wanted us to focus on those details, while something else slipped under the radar. Lita turned, her expression thoughtful. What are you suggesting? That Varkos might be a pawn, not the king. The Krill have always been pragmatic. They wouldn't risk open war for one senator's petty greed. Unless he was serving a larger purpose. Lita finished, her eyes narrowing. We need to talk to Varkos. The holding cell was cold and sterile, the air thick with the metallic tang of disinfectant. Varkos sat slumped on the narrow cot, his face pale and drawn. He looked up as Lita and Nolan entered, a flicker of defiance in his eyes. Empress, he said, his voice raspy, to what do I owe this? Unwelcome visit? We know about your communications with the Krill, Varkos. Lita said, her voice sharp. Tell us everything. Varkos chuckled a dry, humorless sound. You think I'm afraid of you? You have no idea what's coming. Then enlighten us, Nolan said, stepping forward. Who else is involved? Varkos hesitated, his eyes darting nervously. There are forces at play you can't comprehend. A shadow council, pulling the strings from behind the scenes. They control everything, Empress. Even you, Lita scoffed. A shadow council? That's absurd. Is it? Barcos sneered. Look closer, Empress. Look at who benefits from chaos. Look at who whispers in your ear, guiding your decisions. Nolan, his mind racing, felt a strange, unsettling familiarity with Varkos's words. What do you know about this? Council? Varkos shook his head. I've said too much already. They're always watching. He closed his eyes, refusing to speak further. Back in his quarters, Nolan sat hunched over a stack of ancient Iridian texts, his fingers flying across the datapad. He searched for any mention of a secretive group, a hidden power. Hours blurred into a relentless hunt. Finally, he found it. A fragmented reference in a forgotten historical archive, the Veiled Hand, a clandestine organization said to have manipulated events throughout Iridian history, influencing wars, assassinations, and political upheavals. Lita, he said, his voice urgent, I think Varkos might have been telling the truth. I found something. Before he could elaborate, Lita entered, her face grim. The Senate is demanding a swift resolution to the Varkos affair. They're growing restless. Councillor Zelia just gave a public address, criticizing my handling of the investigation, implying bias because of my association with you. Nolan's eyes hardened. They're using me against you. They always will. Lita sighed, running a hand through her dark hair. I have to maintain order, Nolan. I can't let this spiral out of control. Suddenly, Nolan clutched his head, a sharp pain lancing through his skull. Images flickered through his mind, faces, places, events he couldn't quite grasp. He stumbled, his vision blurring. Nolan! Lita rushed to his side, catching him as he collapsed. What's wrong? He stared at her, his eyes wide with confusion. Who are you? Where am I? He looked around the room, his expression filled with terror. What's my name? Lita's heart clenched. Nolan, it's me, Lita. You're safe. You're in your quarters. But his eyes remained blank, unfocused. Lita? I don't understand. Panic tightened Lita's chest. She called for a medical team, but the doctors were baffled. Scans revealed no physical trauma, no neurological abnormalities. It's as if his memories are simply gone, one of the doctors said, shaking his head. As Nolan drifted in and out of consciousness, a strange compulsion gripped him. He stumbled towards a seemingly blank section of wall, his fingers moving with an unnatural certainty. He pressed a sequence of seemingly random points, his touch surprisingly deft. A hidden panel slid open, revealing a small compartment. Lita gasped. What? How did you know that was there? Inside the compartment lay a single data chip, its surface scratched and worn. Nolan stared at it, a flicker of recognition in his eyes. I don't know, he mumbled, his confusion returning. Lita carefully retrieved the data chip. What is it? As they began to examine the data chip, the lights flickered and died, plunging the room into darkness. Before they could react, a volley of energy blasts ripped through the room, tearing apart furniture and shattering the holoscreens. Assassins! Lita cried, drawing her sidearm. Nolan, despite his memory loss and disorientation, moved with a surprising speed and precision. He shoved Lita behind an overturned table, shielding her from the incoming fire. He grabbed a weapon nearby, his hands moving with practiced ease. He fired back, his shots proving quite precise, halting an attacker. Lita watched in stunned disbelief as Nolan, the man who couldn't remember his own name, fought with the skill and ferocity of a seasoned warrior. He moved with a fluid grace, dodging energy blasts and returning fire with deadly accuracy. "How?" she whispered. "No time to explain," Nolan yelled, firing another burst. "We need to get out of here." They fought their way out of the quarters, narrowly avoiding another barrage of energy fire. They raced through the corridors, the sounds of pursuit echoing behind them. "Where are we going?" Lita asked, breathless. "I know someone who can help us," Nolan said, his voice grim. "Someone I used to trust." They slipped through a hidden passage, emerging into the bustling marketplace of the lower city. They needed to disappear, to find someone who could decipher the secrets on the data chip, someone who wouldn't betray them. "Zara," Nolan said, his voice barely a whisper. "We need to find Zara." The information broker's den was a dimly lit, smoky establishment, filled with the murmur of hushed conversations and the clatter of data chips. Zara, a wiry woman with cybernetic implants glinting beneath her dark hair, greeted them with a wary smile. "Nolan, you old dog," she said, her eyes scanning their faces. "What brings you to my humble abode? And who's the lovely lady?" "We need your help, Zara," Nolan said, handing her the data chip. "This contains information someone wants buried deep." Zara took the chip, her fingers already dancing, across her console. "Encrypted Krill tech. This could be interesting. Give me a few hours." As Zara worked, deciphering the data, a sense of unease settled over Nolan. He couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. "What is it?" Lita asked, sensing his tension. "Something's not right," Nolan said, his eyes scanning the crowded room. "I don't like this." Suddenly, a high-pitched whine filled the air, followed by a deafening crack. Zara slumped over her console. A small mark appeared on her head. A red dot like a laser pointer flickered on the wall behind them. "Down!" Nolan yelled, shoving Lita to the ground. Chaos erupted as patrons screamed and scattered. Nolan drew his weapon, his senses on high alert. He scanned the rooftops, searching for the sniper, but it was too late. The assassin was gone, leaving behind only death and the chilling realization that they were facing an enemy far more dangerous than they had imagined. Zara's last transmission echoed in the room. Krill. Superweapon. Planet. Then silence. Lita received a coded message from a trusted ally, warning her that the Shadow Council is planning a coup to overthrow her. The message, fragmented and urgent, had been relayed through 5 different channels, each adding another layer of encryption. Now, in the shielded confines of her private strategy room, Lita and Nolan stared at the decrypted data chip, its surface shimmering with complex schematics. "Krill. Weapon system," Nolan murmured, his brow furrowed as he traced the weapon's design with a fingertip. The holographic projection cast an eerie blue light across his face, highlighting the weariness etched around his eyes. Designed for planetary destabilization, catastrophic earthquakes, volcanic eruption. They're weaponizing geological events. Lita's breath hitched. The schematics detailed a network of subterranean energy conduits designed to amplify and redirect tectonic forces. It's horrendous. But what is its purpose? Nolan zoomed in on a specific set of coordinates. These targeting parameters. They're focused on planetary cores, the primary target. He hesitated, his voice dropping to a near whisper. Iridia. They intend to cripple the Iridian Empire, destabilize the entire region. The color drained from Lita's face. Iridia, her home, her people, the thought of such devastation was almost unbearable. She gripped the edge of the table, her squeezing hard. Who would do this? Nolan ran a diagnostic scan on the weapon's core systems. "There's a weakness," he said, his voice regaining its usual confident edge. "A vulnerability in the energy regulation matrix. If we could disrupt the flow at a specific frequency, we might be able to disable it." "How?" Lita asked, hope flickering in her violet eyes. "It requires a specific type of energy modulator," Nolan explained, pulling up technical specifications. "A high-frequency resonant amplifier, capable of generating a counter-harmonic pulse. Rare. Difficult to obtain." Lita's expression shifted, a spark of recognition igniting within her. "That sounds like a component used in our ancient defense systems. Before the age of planetary shields, we relied on localized energy fields. There might be one in the forgotten archive beneath the capital." A flicker of frustration crossed Nolan's face. He rubbed his temples, his movements jerky. "Archive? Energy modulation? It's gone. The details, the specifics. I can almost grasp it, but it slips away." Another memory loss episode, triggered by the mention of his past expertise. The price he paid for Theron's life, a constant, cruel reminder. Lita placed a hand on his arm, her touch gentle but firm. "It's all right, Nolan. We'll find it. Together." She accessed the palace archives, calling up holographic simulations of Nolan's past missions, the ones she could find records of. Perhaps seeing them will trigger something. The room filled with flickering images of Nolan, younger, more carefree, expertly manipulating energy fields, disabling security systems, piloting spacecraft through asteroid field. Each simulation was a fragment of the man he once was, a ghost of his former self. As Nolan watched, his eyes narrowed, his breathing becoming more rapid. The resonance frequency, the harmonic dampener. "It's coming back," he muttered, his voice strained. "The key is the phasing sequence, a triple inverted pulse, followed by a cascading harmonic cascade." With restored dedication, they prepared to travel to the forgotten archive. The archive was a vast, underground complex, a relic of a bygone era, filled with ancient technology and forgotten secrets. It lay beneath the capital city, its entrance hidden behind a seemingly ordinary maintenance hatch. The air grew heavy and damp as they descended into the archive, the only light source their handheld energy torches. Dust motes danced in the beams, illuminating rows upon rows of inactive machinery and crumbling data storage units. "Automated defense systems," Lita warned, her voice echoing through the cavernous space. "Many are still active. Proceed with caution." As if on cue, a laser grid flickered to life, blocking their path. The beams pulsed with deadly energy, capable of slicing through solid rock. Nolan studied the grid, his eyes scanning the patterns. He moved with a surprising grace, his steps precise and deliberate, as if guided by an unseen force. "There's a sequence," he murmured, his fingers tracing an invisible path through the lasers. "A harmonic resonance. Disrupt the flow at the apex." He reached out, his hand passing through the lasers as if they weren't there. "Now." Lita followed his lead, stepping through the deactivated grid, just as another defense system activated a series of pressure plates that triggered sonic emitters. The emitters unleashed a deafening barrage of sound waves, capable of shattering bones. Nolan clapped his hands together, creating a counter-frequency that neutralized the sonic attack. "Intuition," he said with a shrug, his voice slightly strained. "I can't explain it. I just feel the patterns." Deeper within the archive, Lita discovered a hidden chamber, its entrance concealed behind a false wall. Inside, she found records, not of ancient defense systems, but of something far more sinister. Nolan, look at this. The chamber contained detailed records of the Shadow Council, a clandestine organization composed of influential Iridian senators and business leaders. Their goal: to control the Empire through manipulation, fear, and economic leverage. "They've been operating in the shadows for centuries," Lita said, her voice filled with anger. "Pulling the strings, orchestrating events to their advantage." Nolan examined the records, his eyes widening as he recognized a familiar name. "Councillor Zelia." "She's one of them." Zelia, a prominent senator who had been publicly criticizing Lita's policies, questioning her leadership, planting seeds of doubt in the minds of the people. The betrayal cut deep. They finally reached the chamber containing the energy modulator. It was housed within a reinforced vault, protected by a sophisticated security system of laser grids, pressure plates, and automated turrets. As they prepared to retrieve the modulator, the vault doors hissed open, revealing not a deactivated security system, but a team of assassins, even more skilled and ruthless than the ones they had faced before. "Ambush!" Nolan shouted, shoving Lita behind a nearby pillar. The assassins opened fire, their energy weapons unleashing a torrent of plasma bolts. Nolan reacted instantly, diving for cover and returning fire with his sidearm. He moved with a speed and precision that belied his memory loss, his combat instincts honed by years of experience. He grabbed a discarded power cable, using it to create an improvised whip, disabling one of the turrets. He then ripped a panel off the wall, using it as a shield against the incoming fire. "I'll override the system," Lita shouted, accessing the security console. Her fingers flew across the controls, bypassing the firewalls and security protocols. But as she reached the final override sequence, a warning flashed across the screen. "Self-destruct sequence initiated. Nolan, get out of here. It's going to blow." Nolan ignored her, continuing to hold off the assassins, giving Lita the time she needed. With a final keystroke, she disabled the security system. But the self-destruct sequence continued to count down. They grabbed the energy modulator and fled, racing through the collapsing archive as the walls began to crumble around them. They reached the entrance just as the entire complex imploded, sending a shockwave that threw them to the ground. Back on Iridia, they discovered that Councillor Zelia had launched a public campaign to discredit Lita, accusing her of incompetence, corruption, and endangering the Empire. The propaganda was everywhere, poisoning the minds of the people. Then, Lita received a coded message from a trusted ally, warning her that the Shadow Council was planning a coup to overthrow her. The time for action was now. Lita stepped onto the Senate floor, the weight of her ceremonial crown pressing heavily on her brow, a physical manifestation of the burden she carried. The vast chamber echoed with the murmur of 1,000 voices, each senator a potential ally or a hidden enemy. She raised a hand, silencing the room. "Senators of Iridia," she began, her voice amplified by the chamber's acoustics, "we stand at a precipice. Accusations of treason have been leveled against me, accusations fueled by lies and deceit." Across the chamber, Zelia rose, her expression a mask of righteous indignation. "Empress Lita," she said, her voice sharp and cutting, "the evidence speaks for itself. Your association with a human, a creature of questionable morals and unknown loyalties, has compromised our security and threatened our very way of life. Zelia gestured to a series of data displays that flickered to life, showcasing manipulated recordings and fabricated evidence. Images of Nolan, distorted and taken out of context, flashed across the screen. This human, Zelia continued, has infiltrated our most sacred institutions, poisoning the minds of our youth and undermining the foundations of our empire. Nolan, standing near the back of the chamber, clenched his fist. He saw the subtle inconsistencies in Zelia's presentation, a flicker of hesitation in her eyes, a slight tremor in her voice. Something wasn't right. Fabricated, he thought, the word echoing in the hollow spaces of his fragmented memory. But how? Later, in a secluded chamber beneath the palace, Lita and Nolan met with a small group of loyal senators. The air was thick with tension, the flickering candlelight casting long, dancing shadows on the walls. "She's swaying them," Senator Varro said, his voice grim. "Her propaganda is effective. Many believe she's acting in the best interests of Iridia. We need to expose her lies," Lita said, her voice firm despite the worry etched on her face. "But how?" "She controls the media, the information flow. We're fighting a ghost." Senator Lyra, a woman known for her sharp intellect and unwavering loyalty, leaned forward. "There is a way," she said, her voice hushed. "The Shadow Council. They communicate through a secure, encrypted channel. It's rumored to be unbreakable." "Unbreakable unless we have the key," Nolan said, a flicker of hope igniting in his eyes. Lyra nodded, producing a small, intricately designed crystal key. "This is it. But the decryption sequence is complex. No one has ever cracked it." Hours later, in Lita's private study, Nolan sat hunched over the crystal key, his brow furrowed in concentration. The key pulsed with a faint, internal light, its intricate patterns mocking his effort. Fragments of his past flickered through his mind, images of code breaking, of complex algorithms, of a life he could no longer fully grasp. Frustration welled up inside him. He thumped his hand on the table. "Damn it!" he exclaimed. "It's gone. All of it." Lita placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. "Don't give up, Nolan," she said, her voice soft and soothing. "I can help." She closed her eyes, focusing her empathic abilities, reaching out to touch the frayed edges of his mind. A warmth spread through him, a gentle, guiding force that nudged at the locked doors of his memory. Images flooded his mind, symbols, sequences, patterns. He gasped, his hand trembling as he began to manipulate the crystal key. The light pulsed faster, brighter, until finally, with a soft click, the key unlocked. The study filled with static as the Shadow Council's communication channel opened. Distorted voices echoed through the room, revealing their plans for a coup. Planetary defense drill. Cover for troop deployment. Seize key government buildings. Lita and Nolan exchanged a horrified glance. "They're going to use the drill," Lita said, her voice tight with fear, "to seize control of the government." "And the superweapon," Nolan added, his mind racing. "They'll use it to enforce their rule. We have to stop them, Lita. But how?" "We have so little time." Nolan paced the room, his mind searching for a solution. He stopped abruptly, his eyes widening. "The energy modulator," he said, his voice filled with sudden excitement. "We can use it to create a localized energy surge, disrupt the superweapon's targeting system." Lita frowned. "It's too dangerous, Nolan. The modulator is unstable. One wrong calculation, and we could destroy the entire city." "It's our only chance," Nolan insisted. "But it requires precise calculations, a stable energy source. We need an expert. Lita closed her eyes, focusing her thoughts. There is one, she said. Dr. Aris, a reclusive scientist. He possesses the necessary expertise and equipment. Lita contacted Dr. Aris, her voice pleading. We need your help, she said. Iridia is in danger. Dr. Aris hesitated, his voice trembling with fear. I can't. The Shadow Council, they're too powerful. Lita's voice hardened. They are powerful because good people like you allow them to be. I can offer you protection, Dr. Aris, but I need your help. Iridia needs your help. A long silence followed, broken only by the static of the communication channel. Finally, Dr. Aris spoke, his voice filled with newfound tenacity. I'll do it, he said. I'll help you. As they prepared to use the energy modulator, alarms blared throughout the palace. Red lights flashed, and the sounds of gunfire and explosions echoed through the corridors. They're attacking, Lita exclaimed, her eyes wide with alarm. Zelia's forces had launched a surprise attack, attempting to capture Lita and seize control of the palace. Nolan and Lita were separated in the chaos, forced to fight their way through the palace defenses. Nolan, relying on his instincts and fragmented memories of combat training, moved through the palace with surprising agility. He dodged laser fire, disarmed guards, and used his knowledge of the palace layout to evade Zelia's forces. Lita, meanwhile, found herself cornered by Zelia. It's over, Lita, Zelia said, her voice cold and triumphant. Your reign is at an end. You're wrong, Zelia, Lita retorted, her voice filled with defiance. Iridia will never submit to your tyranny. Tyranny? Zelia scoffed. I'm restoring Iridia to its former glory, purging the weakness and corruption that have plagued it for too long. You were too soft, Lita, too compassionate. Zelia raised her weapon, aiming it at Lita's head. Now, you will pay the price for your weakness. Just as Zelia was about to fire, Nolan burst into the room, tackling her to the ground. The two engaged in a fierce hand-to-hand combat, their movements a blur of fists and kicks. You should have stayed out of this, human, Zelia snarled, her eyes filled with hatred. You have no idea what you're fighting for. I know exactly what I'm fighting for, Nolan retorted, landing a solid blow to Zelia's jaw. I'm fighting for Lita, for Iridia, for a future free from your twisted ideology. During the fight, Zelia spat out a name from Nolan's past, a name that triggered a painful memory. Remember Anya, Nolan, she hissed. Remember how you failed her. Nolan froze, momentarily stunned by the sudden flood of memories. A young woman's face flashed before his eyes, her voice echoing in his ears. I trusted you, Nolan. Zelia seized the opportunity, kicking Nolan away and scrambling to her feet. You're weak, Nolan, she sneered, haunted by your past. You'll never be strong enough to stop me. With a final, triumphant glare, Zelia fled the room, leaving Nolan reeling from the painful memories. Nolan roared, a primal sound ripped from his chest as he slammed his shoulder into the last of Zelia's guards, sending the aliens sprawling. The guard's weapon clattered across the polished floor, skittering to a halt near a fallen pillar. He didn't bother checking if the guard was alive. Lita was close. He could feel it. He burst through the archway, plasma fire singeing the air where he'd been moments before. Lita stood back to back with a pair of royal guards, deflecting energy blasts with her ceremonial blade. Zelia, clad in black tactical armor, advanced with cold, predatory grace, a wicked-looking energy pistol leveled at Lita's head. Lita parried a wild shot from Zelia, the force of the impact jarring her arm. One of her guards went down with a shriek, clutching his smoking side. "Lita!" Nolan yelled, diving forward. Zelia whirled, her pistol tracking onto Nolan. Lita, with a speed that belied her regal bearing, slammed into Zelia, knocking the shot wide. The blast seared a chunk out of the ceiling, showering them with crystalline dust. Nolan reached them, grabbing Zelia's wrist and twisting. The pistol clattered to the floor. Zelia snarled, a flash of pure hatred in her eyes. He didn't hesitate, driving a fist into her jaw. Zelia crumpled. He looked at Lita, really looked at her, for the first time since this nightmare had begun. A smear of soot darkened her cheek, and a thin trickle of blood ran from a cut on her arm, but her eyes were alight with a fierce, defiant fire. Relief, sharp and intense, flooded him. He reached out, cupping her face in his hands. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice rough. Lita placed her hand over his, her touch sending a jolt through him. "I am now," she said, her voice a breathless whisper. The moment hung between them, a fragile bubble of connection in the midst of chaos. "We need to get to Eris," Lita said, breaking the spell. "And the modulator, if Zelia is here, the superweapon." Nolan nodded, his mind snapping back to the imminent threat. "Right, Eris first. He's the only one who can calibrate it." They moved quickly, Lita barking orders to the remaining guard. They knew Zelia's forces would be converging soon. The main access corridors would be death trapped. "There's a service passage," Lita said, leading him towards a seemingly blank wall. "It's not on any of the official schematics." She pressed a sequence of symbols, and a section of the wall slid open, revealing a narrow, dimly lit tunnel. They moved through the passage, the air thick with the smell of dust and disuse. The tunnel twisted and turned, a labyrinth of forgotten maintenance routes. It was slow going, but it kept them out of sight. They emerged near the palace's outer perimeter, just as a transport, clearly marked with Dr. Aris's research insignia, approached the landing platform. But even as it descended, alarms blared. Energy fire streaked across the sky, impacting near the transport, Zelia's fighters. "Aris!" Lita cried, her voice filled with anguish. Without hesitation, they sprinted towards a mobile defense turret, a relic from a bygone era of palace security. Nolan jumped into the gunner's seat, Lita taking the controls for targeting and shield management. "Brace yourself," Lita said, her voice tight with concentration. The turret roared to life, its energy cannons spitting bolts of searing plasma. Nolan's hands moved on the controls, his movements surprisingly fluid, a hint of his old instincts guiding him. He targeted the fighters, his aim instinctive, honed from years of practice. The memory flickered, just out of reach. Lita managed the shields, deflecting incoming fire with precise timing. Together they formed a deadly combination, a whirlwind of coordinated action. They managed to drive off the fighters, the transport limping towards the landing platform. The ramp lowered, and Dr. Aris emerged, his face pale and drawn. He stumbled slightly, clutching a datapad to his chest. He looked utterly defeated. "Your Majesty," Aris said, his voice trembling. I don't know if I can do this. The risks." Lita rushed to his side, taking his hand. "Aris, we need you. The entire planet needs you. I trust you. I know you can do this." Nolan watched them, a strange unease settling in his stomach. Something about Dr. Aris. Something wasn't right. It wasn't just the fear in his eyes. It was something else. His gaze snagged on a small device clipped to Dr. Aris's wrist, a sleek, metallic band with a series of tiny lights. It was familiar. A jolt of recognition, sharp and disorienting, slammed into him. He'd seen that device before. On what mission? What planet? What technology? His head throbbed, a blinding pain erupting behind his eyes. Images flashed through his mind, corridors, strange symbols, the cold, sterile light of a laboratory. He staggered, clutching his head. "Nolan!" Lita cried, her voice filled with concern. Dr. Aris turned, his eyes widening. "What's wrong?" Nolan gasped, trying to focus. That device. On your wrist. I remember." But the memory dissolved, leaving him with only a searing headache and a profound sense of disorientation. Dr. Aris reached out, his touch surprisingly gentle. "Let me see. You're experiencing memory fragmentation. It's a side effect of the trauma you've endured. I have some expertise in neural technology. Perhaps I can help." Lita frowned. "Can you, Aris? Is it safe?" "It's a risk," Aris admitted, "but it may be the only way to unlock whatever memories are being suppressed. And those memories, they could be vital." They reached the energy modulator chamber, a vast circular room dominated by a towering machine humming with barely suppressed power. The chamber was heavily guarded, Zelia's troops forming a wall of armored bodies. "We can't get through that," Nolan said, his voice grim. Lita's eyes narrowed, a spark of determination igniting within them. "We create a diversion. I'll draw their attention. You and Aris get to the modulator. Calibrate it. Shut down the superweapon."
"Lita, that's insane,"
Nolan protested. "It's the only way," she said, her voice firm. "Trust me." Nolan hesitated, then nodded. He trusted her. He had to. Lita turned to Dr. Aris. "Are you ready?" Dr. Aris swallowed hard, his face pale. "As I'll ever be." Lita took a deep breath, then stepped forward, her voice ringing out across the chamber.
"Zelia, I know you're listening."
"Come out and face me." As Lita launched her diversion, drawing the guards' attention, Nolan and Dr. Aris slipped through a side entrance, quickly reaching the modulator. The machine hummed with immense power, its complex systems baffling to Nolan. "Can you do this?" Nolan asked, his voice imbued with doubt. Dr. Aris's hands trembled as he accessed the modulator's control panel. I designed this machine. I know it better than anyone. But I never intended for it to be used like this. To power a weapon of such destruction. We don't have a choice, Aris," Nolan said, his voice firm. "The Shadow Council will use it. They'll destroy everything." "But what if we fail?" Aris asked, his voice filled with despair. "What if we make things worse? I am a pacifist. I never wanted to be involved in any of this." Nolan placed a hand on Dr. Aris's shoulder, his gaze unwavering. "You have a responsibility, Aris. You created this technology. You have the power to stop them. Think of the lives you'll save. Think of Lita. Think of Theron." Dr. Aris looked at Nolan, his eyes searching. He saw the desperation, the dedication, the unwavering belief. He took a deep breath, his shoulders straightening. "You're right," he said, his voice gaining strength. "I have to try." They worked together, their movements precise and coordinated. Nolan, drawing on a surprising understanding of complex systems, helped Dr. Aris navigate the intricate controls. Time seemed to compress, the fate of the planet hanging in the balance. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Dr. Aris entered the final sequence. The modulator hummed, its energy output stabilizing. It's done, Doctor, Aris said, his voice filled with relief. We've calibrated it. But even as he spoke, alarms blared. A synthesized voice echoed through the chamber. Unauthorized modification detected. Failsafe system activated. Superweapon charging primary weapon. Nolan's blood ran cold. They had succeeded in calibrating the modulator, but they had also triggered a failsafe. The superweapon was about to be deployed. Then, a communication signal blared over the comms system. Zelia's voice, cold and triumphant, filled the chamber. Lita, my dear Empress, I have some unwelcome news. I have captured several of your most loyal senators. Unless you surrender immediately, I will be forced to execute them, one by one. We're literally rewriting the rules of both engineering and biology. The words hung in the air, unwill-powered, as a red alert klaxon blared through the palace. Lita's hand, which had been resting on Nolan's arm, clenched into a fist. On the main screen, Zelia's face, twisted with manic glee, filled the viewport. Empress Lita, Zelia's voice, crackled, distorted by the transmission. Your time for deliberation is over. You have refused my generous offer. Therefore, I present to you the consequences of your stubbornness. The feed cut to a live broadcast from within the hostage chamber. Senator Vorin, his face pale and drawn, stood before a makeshift execution platform. A masked figure raised a plasma blade. Lita gasped, a choked sound lost in the rising din of alarm. I will not yield to threats, Lita declared, her voice firm with resolve, though Nolan saw the tension in her face. She turned to General Raxos. Engage Protocol Omega. Secure the palace. Seal it off. Find Zelia. I want her comms analyzed, every channel, every routine, now. Technicians hurried, their fingers dancing across glowing consoles. The air crackled with static and shouted orders. Lita stood rigidly, her violet eyes fixed on the main screen, where the image of Senator Vorin's execution replayed in a horrifying loop. Nolan, his head throbbing, stepped forward. Empress, with your permission, I might be able to help with the communication channels. He hesitated, his hand instinctively going to his temple. Before the barter, I had some experience with advanced tech. Signal tracing, encryption. It's fragmented, but maybe something's left. Dr. Aris, his brow furrowed, approached Lita. Your Majesty, I must strongly advise against this. Nolan's neural pathways are still highly unstable. Accessing those memories, especially under duress, could cause irreparable damage. Lita turned, her expression conflicted. I understand your concerns, Doctor, but we are running out of time. The senators, she trailed off, her gaze hardening. Authorize Dr. Aris to assist you, Nolan. He will monitor your vitals and terminate the process immediately if there's any risk of permanent harm. But we need that information. Lita placed a hand on Nolan's shoulder, her touch surprisingly firm. Be careful, Nolan. We can't afford to lose you, too. In a secluded research lab, Nolan sat strapped into a neural interface chair. Dr. Aris hovered nearby, his face a mask of professional concern, his hands constantly adjusting the monitoring equipment. Nolan closed his eyes, focusing on the swirling chaos in his mind. Images flickered, coded transmissions, complex algorithms, the layout of shielded communication hubs. He gasped, a jolt of pain shooting through his skull. Neural activity spiking, Aris reported, his voice tight. Nolan, can you hear me? Focus on something stable. Nolan struggled to breathe, fighting the disorientation. He saw a symbol, A three-pronged fork, repeated over and over. A location, a physical place, sector. Gamma 9, Nolan managed, his voice strained. Sub-level, delta, shielded, heavily shielded. Hours blurred into a single, agonizing stream of fragmented memories and searing pain. Finally, Aris pulled him from the chair, his face pale with exhaustion. "We have a potential location," Aris announced, his voice hoarse. "Sector Gamma 9, sub-level Delta, but the signal is heavily shielded. Infiltration will be difficult." Just then, the main screen flickered again. Zelia's face reappeared, her smile even more chilling than before. "Empress Lita," she purred, "to further demonstrate my willpower, I have decided to expedite the negotiation process." The feed cut to the hostage chamber. Another senator, this one a frail, elderly woman, was dragged to the execution platform. The plasma blade flashed. Lita recoiled as if struck, her hand flying to her mouth. A wave of nausea washed over her. She stumbled, and Nolan instinctively reached out to steady her. "Damn," Lita whispered, her voice raw with grief. "Damn her to the deepest hells." But even as tears streamed down her face, her eyes burned with a fierce, unwavering purpose. "We will not yield. We will not break." Nolan, witnessing Lita's pain and her unwavering tenacity, felt a surge of protectiveness, a visceral need to shield her from further harm. A clearer memory fragment surfaced. Zelia's tactics, her reliance on predictable patterns, her arrogance. "Empress," Nolan said, his voice stronger now, more confident. "I think I know how to exploit her communication network. A counter-strategy, a way to draw her forces away from the hostages." Aris frowned, his expression skeptical. "Nolan, that's highly irregular. Manipulating her forces could have unforeseen consequences. There are ethical considerations." Lita turned to Nolan, her eyes searching his. "What do you propose?" Nolan outlined his plan, a risky gambit based on his recovered memory of Zelia's operational protocols. Aris continued to voice his objections, citing potential risks and ethical violation. Lita listened intently, her expression unreadable. Finally, she made her decision. "I trust your instincts, Nolan. Implement your plan. Dr. Aris, you will assist him, but your priority is mitigating any potential risks to our own forces." Lita turned to General Raxos. "Prepare a diversionary attack on Sector Alpha 7. Make it convincing. I want Zelia to think that's our primary target." As the palace prepared for the counterattack, the main screen flashed a new alert. A progress bar appeared displaying the charging sequence of the superweapon. It had reached 75%. In the research lab, Aris made a subtle adjustment to the energy modulator, claiming it was a safety measure, but his movements were too quick, too furtive. Nolan, watching him, felt a jolt of recognition, a flicker of a memory, a betrayal, a deception, a trusted advisor whispering lies in his ear. He frowned, a sense of unease settling in his stomach. Just then, Lita received a coded message, transmitted through a hidden channel. It was from Senator Phelan, one of the captured senators. The message was brief but critical. A weakness in Zelia's defenses, a vulnerability in her shield configuration. Nolan's eyes widened. The senator's message confirmed his recovered memory, strengthening his dedication to stop Zelia. He knew what he had to do. As they prepared to launch their counterattack, Nolan pulled Lita aside, his voice low and urgent. "Empress, there's something you need to know about Dr. Aris." He hesitated, his gaze troubled. I don't trust him. Lita's breath hitched. Could Nolan be right? Aris, a man she'd known and trusted for decades, a traitor? The thought felt like a physical blow. Nolan, are you certain? Nolan nodded, his face hardened. As certain as I can be with half my memories missing, Lita. The data streams, they're subtle, but they're there. He's feeding Zelia information, diverting resources. Lita closed her eyes for a moment, fighting the wave of nausea. Initiate the diversionary attack, she commanded, her voice barely a whisper. All fighter squadrons, engage Zelia's forces near the outer perimeter. Give them something to chase. The palace shuddered as the fighters launched, their iron engines screaming a defiant challenge into the void. Nolan, hunched over a console, his fingers flying across the holographic display, monitored Zelia's communication network. Static crackled in his ears, alien voices a garbled mess. But beneath the noise, he detected a pattern, a rhythmic pulse in the encrypted channels, a vulnerability. He fed the data to the fighter squadron. Breach the comms at Vector 79 Delta. Exploit the harmonic resonance. They won't know what hit them. A crackling voice, barely audible above the din of battle, confirmed. Executing Empress. Commencing breach. The diversion worked. A frantic report came moments later. Empress, Zelia's forces are responding. A significant portion are detaching from the main assault and pursuing our fighters. Satisfied that the bait had been taken, Lita turned her attention back to the palace. Varro, proceed with the hostage rescue. Maintain stealth. I want those senators safe. Below them, in the labyrinthine corridors of the palace, Captain Varro led his elite team, their movements fluid and silent. They hugged the shadows, their energy weapons humming softly. Nolan, his brow furrowed, called out, Lita, I'm seeing something. Unusual data streams originating from Aris's secure terminal. He's accessing restricted areas of the network. Lita's stomach clenched. What kind of data? Telemetry, security protocols. He's got his fingers in everything. Nolan's voice was grim. I don't like this, Lita. I think he's trying to sabotage us from within. Varro, report, Lita commanded, her voice tight. A moment later, Varro's voice, calm and professional, echoed in her ear. We've breached the hostage-holding area, Empress. Minimal resistance. Too easy. Confirm identities, Lita ordered, a knot forming in her gut. Varro's voice returned, infused with a hint of unease. We've secured a group of senators and palace officials, Empress, but key hostages are missing. Senator Valerius, he's not here. The air in the command center seemed to thicken. Lita turned to Nolan, her eyes pleading. What's happening? Nolan shook his head, his gaze fixed on the swirling data streams on his console. It's a misdirection, Lita. Aris is playing us. Lita strode towards Dr. Aris's office, Nolan close behind. She found him hunched over his console, his fingers flying across the keys. Aris. Lita's voice was dangerously soft. Explain these data anomalies. Explain your unauthorized access to secure communication channels. Aris looked up, his expression a mask of innocent surprise. Empress, what is the meaning of this? I am merely attempting to mitigate the damage caused by Zelia's interference. There appears to be a system-wide malfunction. He gestured to the flickering displays around him. Zelia is a master of cyber warfare. These anomalies are likely her doing. Nolan stepped forward, his eyes narrowed. Don't insult our intelligence, Aris. You're feeding Zelia information. You're helping her. Aris scoffed. preposterous. I have served this empire for decades. How dare you accuse me of treason? You outsider. Lita held up a hand, silencing them both. Enough. Aris, remain here. I will review your logs personally. While Lita coordinated the extraction of the rescued hostages, her mind racing with doubt and suspicion, Nolan, driven by a gut feeling he couldn't ignore, slipped back into Aris's office. He moved with a practiced stealth that surprised even himself, fragments of his old life surfacing unbidden. He bypassed the security protocols with an ease that spoke of long experience, his fingers dancing across the keys. He found them quickly, heavily encrypted files, their contents indecipherable at a glance. But the sheer volume of data, the timestamps, the coded messages, it was undeniable. Aris was communicating with Zelia. Schematics of the palace's security systems, vulnerabilities in the communication network. It was all there, laid bare for the enemy. Lita's voice, tight with worry, broke through his concentration. Nolan, we have a problem. Intelligence reports indicate that the remaining hostages have been moved to a previously unknown underground facility beneath the palace. Nolan frowned. Underground facility? I haven't seen anything like that on the schematics. The report seems validated by multiple sources, Lita continued, her voice tinged with doubt. But something feels wrong. The coordinates? They don't quite align with the palace layout. Nolan straightened, his face grim. It's a trap, Lita. Aris is leading them into a trap. He presented his findings, displaying the encrypted files and the coded messages on a holographic display. This is irrefutable, Lita. Aris is working with Zelia. He's been sabotaging us from the inside. Lita stared at the evidence, her face pale. The weight of the betrayal crashed down on her, crushing her. I need time to verify this, Nolan. I can't believe. Aris has been a friend, a trusted advisor for so long. Before Nolan could respond, the palace plunged into darkness. The lights flickered and died, plunging the command center into emergency lighting. Alarms blared, their shrill cries echoing through the corridors. Empress, we've lost primary power. A frantic voice shouted over the emergency comm channel. Zelia triggered a fail-safe protocol. The energy grid is down. Internal communication systems are offline. Another voice, even more urgent, cut through the chaos. Empress, the superweapon, its charging sequence is accelerating. We're at 95% completion. Below them, Varro's team, acting on the inaccurate intelligence report, reached the designated coordinates for the underground facility. The heavy blast doors hissed open, revealing a dark, narrow corridor. Varro, his senses on high alert, led his team inside, unaware of the impending danger. As the last member of the team crossed the threshold, the blast doors slammed shut with a deafening clang. The corridor ahead erupted in a hail of laser fire. Zelia's forces, heavily armed and waiting in ambush, opened fire. Screams echoed through the confined space as Varro's team, caught completely off guard, returned fire, their energy weapons spitting bolts of searing energy. Men fell, their bodies riddled with laser burn. The facility sealed shut, trapping them inside, a tomb of steel and fire. Lita's voice, though permeated with a tremor of betrayal, cut through the stunned silence. Dr. Aris is to be placed under immediate arrest. Seal off his quarters and laboratory. No one is to enter without express authorization. Despite the turmoil churning within her, the Empress's command held absolute authority. The safety of the palace of Theron demanded it. Even as palace security surged forward, weapons drawn, Aris snarled, a manic glint in his eyes. He lunged for a hidden panel beneath his lectern, fingers fumbling for a control. He had to get the message out. Nolan, reacting on instinct, hurled himself forward, tackling Aris to the ground. The doctor thrashed, a small device clutched in his hand. Its casing cracked from the impact. A burst of static filled the air, followed by fragmented code. Nolan wrestled the device free, his mind racing. He didn't understand the Iridian encryption protocols, but something about the rhythmic pulse of the signal felt familiar. Smuggler's intuition. He was trying to transmit, Nolan grunted, handing the damaged device to a nearby guard. The destination, it's faint, but I'm betting it's heading towards the underground facility. Specifically, a hidden communication array within. Lita, regaining her composure, addressed the remaining palace staff, her voice amplified by the emergency comm system. People of Iridia, we have been betrayed. Dr. Aris has been apprehended for acts of treason. I assure you that all necessary measures are being taken to restore order and ensure the safety of the palace and its inhabitants. Her words were met with a mixture of fear and persistence. As if in response to her declaration, the palace plunged further into chaos. The emergency lights flickered, sputtered, and died, casting deeper sections into near-total darkness. The hum of the life support systems in Theron's wing faltered, replaced by an ominous silence. Nolan cursed under his breath. The power grid, it's failing fast. And it's not just a simple overload. He grabbed a datapad from a nearby station, his fingers flying across the screen as he accessed the palace schematics. There's a secondary power source, an old geothermal generator, but it requires manual activation. It's our only chance to keep the critical systems online. Lita nodded grimly. Then we have no choice. We go now. She summoned a small security detail, their faces grim in the dim emergency lighting. Lead the way, Nolan. They moved through the darkened corridors, the silence broken only by the hiss of their breath and the rhythmic thud of their boots. Shadows danced around them, playing tricks on the eye. Nolan, relying on his spatial memory and the faint glow of the datapad, guided them through the labyrinthine passages. Suddenly, the comm system crackled to life, Zelia's voice, amplified and distorted, filling the air. Lita, my dear Empress, such a shame it had to come to this. But you must admit the game is over. Aris played his part perfectly. Lita's face hardened. Zelia, what do you want? Zelia chuckled, a cold, chilling sound. Simple. I want what is rightfully mine, the throne. Publicly abdicate, surrender the palace, and I might spare Senator Valerius. Refuse and, well, let's just say his continued health is entirely dependent on your cooperation. Nolan, ignoring Zelia's taunts, was focused on the datapad. Empress, I'm detecting a faint energy signature deep within the underground facility. It's shielded, but it's definitely there. It's coming from a specific location within the facility, suggesting a hidden chamber or power source. Lita's voice was steel. I will not yield to your demands, Zelia. I will not abandon my people. I will uphold my responsibilities as Empress, no matter the consequences. They reached the entrance to the secondary power generator, a massive steel door sealed tight. But it wasn't the door that was the problem. It was the heavily armed soldiers guarding it, clad in Zelia's colors, their weapons trained on them. Stand down, Lita commanded, her voice echoing through the corridor. In the name of the Iridian Empire, I order you to surrender." The soldiers remained unmoving, their faces impassive. One of them stepped forward, raising his weapon. "We answer only to Zelia." The firefight erupted in a blinding flash of energy and the deafening roar of plasma fire. Nolan, drawing on skills he barely remembered possessing, moved with a speed and precision that surprised even him. He ducked behind a overturned crate, returning fire with a stolen plasma pistol. His movements were fluid, instinctive, a dance of death he had performed countless times in a life he could no longer fully recall. He moved through the fray, neutralizing soldiers with precise shots, making a path for Lita and her team to proceed. He swept a soldier's legs, taking his weapon, then used the body as a shield. Lita, despite her lack of combat experience, held her ground, firing with surprising accuracy, her face a mask of stubborn persistence. Nolan finally cleared a path to the generator control panel. "Empress, now." Lita, ignoring the continuing firefight around her, reached the panel and slammed her hand onto the activation rune. The generator shuddered, groaned, and then roared to life, bathing the chamber in a flickering green light. As the secondary power grid sputtered online, restoring essential functions to a limited portion of the palace, a garbled voice crackled over a damaged comm unit. "Empress, this is Varro facility. Heavy casualties, dwindling resources." Lita's face paled. "Varro, what is the situation?" The transmission was weak, fading in and out. "Not a prison. Research lab. Hostages. Experiments." The line went dead. "Experiments?" Lita whispered, horror creeping into her voice. Nolan, his mind racing, focused on the energy signature he had detected earlier. That energy signature, it's linked to a prototype shield generator, designed to protect something during its final charging sequence. Lita's eyes widened in realization. The superweapon. Zelia intends to use the hostages as a human shield to prevent any attempts to disable it. Nolan's gaze hardened. "We can't let that happen." He pointed to a barely visible access panel high on the wall. "There's a ventilation shaft. Leads directly into the facility. It's a long shot, but it's our only chance to bypass the main entrance, rescue Varro's team and those hostages." Lita looked at Nolan, her eyes filled with a mixture of fear and commitment. "It's a dead end." "It's our sole hope," Nolan said, his voice firm. Lita took a breath, her hand resting on Nolan's arm, a silent nod to their shared weight, their strong tie. "Then do it. Lead the way, Nolan. Bring them home." Nolan, accompanied by a small hand-picked team, entered the ventilation shaft, the narrow metal passage pressing in on him from all sides. Dust motes danced in the beam of his helmet lamp, the air thick with the metallic tang of stale recycled air, and something else, something acrid and vaguely chemical, that made his nostrils twitch. He adjusted his comm, his voice tight. "All right, team, let's move. Keep it quiet." Lita watched from the palace command center, the holographic display showing Nolan's progress as a tiny green blip snaking through the facility's schematic. Varro's team's red blips were engaged in a fierce firefight near the main entrance. A necessary distraction, but every explosion sent a jolt of anxiety through her. "Varro report," she commanded, her voice betraying none of her fear. "Holding them, Empress?" Varro's gruff voice crackled back. "But they're coming hard. Need more time." Lita bit back a course. "Nolan, ETA to the shield generator?" 5 minutes, maybe less," Nolan replied, his voice strained. "We've got a problem." Ventilation fans jammed. Looks like a deliberate obstruction. Nolan's team huddled around the massive, unmoving fan, its blades twisted and warped. "Someone wanted this route blocked," a gruff voice muttered. Jack's, Nolan's second, an ex-soldier skilled with devices, and a weary view of things. "We could blow it, but that'll bring the whole damn facility down on us." Nolan ran a hand over the mangled metal, his brow furrowed. "No, there's a bypass panel here. Old system. Probably hasn't been used in cycles." He pulled out a multi-tool, its tiny lights illuminating the corroded connections. "Jax, give me some light." "We do this quiet." Minutes stretched into an eternity. As Nolan worked, the only sound the scrape of metal against metal and the frantic pounding of Lita's heart in the command center. Finally, with a soft click, the bypass engaged. The fan shuddered, then slowly, grudgingly, began to turn. "Moving again," Nolan reported. "But we've got another issue. Proximity sensors. Looks like Zelia didn't want anyone crawling through these vents." The ventilation shaft narrowed, the walls lined with tiny, almost invisible sensors. "If we trip one of those," Jack said, "the whole system locks down. Alarms, blast doors, the works." Nolan grinned, a flash of the old smuggler surfacing. "Not if we give them a little. Static." He pulled a small device from his belt, cobbled together from scavenged parts. "Homemade EMP. Range is limited, but it should be enough to blind them for a few seconds." He activated the device, a faint hum filling the narrow space. "All right, move fast. We've got maybe 10 seconds of blackout." They crawled through the sensor grid, Nolan in the lead, the EMP device humming in his hand. Sweat trickled down his face, the tension almost palpable. They reached the other side without incident. "Clear," Nolan whispered. But that was too easy. Zelia's not stupid. They reached a junction point, the ventilation shaft splitting into 3 separate tunnels. "All right, here's the plan," Nolan said, his voice low. "Half of us go after Varro and the hostages. The other half disables the shield generator. Jax, you're with me. We're going to shut down that weapon." Lita's voice crackled over the corn. "Nolan, be careful. I'm detecting increased security around the shield generator." "Understood, Empress," Nolan replied. "We'll be quiet." Nolan's team, consisting of Jax and a young Iridian tech specialist named Ilara, crawled through the narrow tunnel leading to the shield generator, the air growing warmer with each meter. They reached a small observation port, peering down into a large holding cell. Inside, several figures in lab coats huddled together, their faces pale and drawn. "Those are the scientists," Ilara whispered. "Zelia forced them to work on the superweapon." "What kind of weapon?" Nolan asked, his voice grim. One of the scientists, a gaunt, gray-haired man, looked up, his eyes filled with despair. "It's a virus," he said, voice low and faint now. "Modified to affect certain genetic traits. Zelia plans total removal. Anyone who disagrees." Nolan's eyes narrowed. Elimination. That was Zelia's plan. He had to stop her. "All right," he said, his voice hardening. "We're getting you out of here. Ilara, disable the security cameras. Jax, you're with me. Let's neutralize those guards." They moved with practiced efficiency, Ilara using her technical skills to disable the cameras, while Nolan and Jax silently took down the guards, their movements swift and lethal. Within minutes, the holding cell was secure. "Get them weapons," Nolan ordered, gesturing to a nearby weapons locker. "And tell them what's happening. They need to be ready to defend themselves." Meanwhile, in the main facility, Varro's team was taking heavy casualties, the diversionary attack proving more costly than anticipated. "Empress, we can't hold them much longer," Varro reported, his voice strained. "We need reinforcements." "Hold your ground, Varro," Lita replied, her voice firm. "Nolan is almost there." Back in the ventilation shaft, Lita detected a surge in energy readings from the superweapon. "Nolan, Zelia is preparing to launch the virus. You need to hurry." Nolan's team reached the shield generator control room, bursting through the door to find a lone technician frantically working at the console. "Don't move!" Nolan shouted, raising his blaster. The technician froze, his hands hovering over the controls. He turned, his face pale and sweating. "I can help you," he said, his voice trembling. "I'm a double agent. I've been with Iridia the whole time." "Show it," Nolan said. His eyes narrowed. The technician paused, then typed a code in. "That's an override access," he said. "It'll disable the shield generator." Nolan approached the console cautiously, his blaster still trained on the technician. He began to input the code, his fingers flying across the keys. Suddenly, a comm screen lit. Zelia's face there, her eyes keen and watchful. "I knew you'd come, Nolan," she said. Her voice held a firm, cool tone. "I anticipated your every move." "What have you done, Zelia?" Lita's voice boomed from Nolan's corn. Zelia ignored her. "The failsafe is activated," she said, her eyes fixed on Nolan. "The shield generator controls are locked down, and a self-destruct sequence has been initiated. In a matter of minutes, this entire facility will be destroyed." Nolan cursed under his breath. He glanced at the console, the countdown timer ticking down relentlessly. "There's only one way to stop it," the technician said, his voice barely a whisper. "You have to manually adjust the system inside. The core is highly dangerous," Ilara said. "It's too risky." "It's the only option," the tech replied. "If we don't, the virus will be launched, and countless lives will be lost." Nolan looked at the timer, then at Lita's image on the comm screen, her face etched with fear and desperation. He knew what he had to do. "I'll do it," he said, his voice calm and resolute. "Nolan, no," Lita cried, her voice cracking with emotion. "It's too dangerous." "I don't have a choice, Lita," Nolan replied, his voice soft but firm. "I made a promise to protect you and Theron, and I intend to keep it." He looked at Jax and Ilara. "Secure the facility, rescue the remaining hostages. I'm counting on you." He turned to the technician. "Take me to the core." The technician led Nolan to a heavily shielded door, the radiation warning symbols glowing ominously. He activated the door, the heavy metal panels sliding open with a groan. Nolan took a deep breath, his heart pounding in his chest. He glanced back at Lita's image on the comm screen, their eyes locking for a long moment. He saw the love, the fear, and the gratitude in her gaze. "I'll be back," he said, his voice filled with a confidence he didn't quite feel. He stepped through the door, the heavy panels sliding shut behind him, sealing him inside the radioactive core, his fate uncertain as the countdown timer ticked down. Nolan crumpled, the override code executed just as his body screamed in protest. Every cell felt like it was burning from the inside out. He tasted blood, his vision tunneling, the metallic tang sharp against the coppery burn in his throat. Blackness clawed at the edges of his awareness. Even through the static, Lita's voice cut through, sharp and commanding. "Medical team, immediate extraction. That's an order." "Protocol be damned, I want him now." The urgency in her tone was a physical force, a desperate plea that echoed in his fading consciousness. He registered the jarring sensation of being lifted, then nothing. The world swam back into focus through a haze of pain. He was in a sterile white room, the air humming with the low thrum of advanced medical equipment. A complex array of lights blinked rhythmically, casting eerie shadows on the smooth metallic surfaces. Lita was there, her face etched with worry, her violet eyes fixed on the monitors displaying his vitals. She wore a simple white medical gown, her regal bearing somehow amplified by the stark setting. She was personally adjusting the flow rate on a complex IV drip, her brow furrowed in concentration. He drifted in and out, vaguely aware of cool fluids flooding his veins, of Lita's soft hands, adjusting sensors on his chest. He heard her murmuring, a low, soothing cadence in Iridian, a language he barely understood, yet somehow now felt resonating within him. Unseen, unheard, Lita confessed to the still form on the bio-bed. Nolan, she thought, her emotions a turbulent storm. What have you done? What have I allowed you to do? You risked everything, for Theron, for me. I was blind, trapped in my grief. You saw a path, a solution where I saw only despair. I owe you everything, more than everything. I think I'm falling in love with you, Nolan Davis. A human, a smuggler, my savior. A tear escaped her eye, tracing a path down her cheek. Forgive me for the burden I have placed upon you. He blinked, his vision clearing slightly. Lita's face swam into sharper focus, her expression a mixture of relief and exhaustion. Nolan, she breathed, her voice thick with emotion. You're awake. She reached for his hand, her touch surprisingly gentle. Lita? His voice was raspy, unfamiliar. What happened? He tried to sit up, but a wave of dizziness washed over him. You saved us, she said softly, gently pushing him back against the pillows. You stopped the self-destruct. You were exposed to a lethal dose of radiation. Her fingers tightened around his. We almost lost you. A medical scan chimed, displaying a complex readout of Nolan's cellular structure. Lita frowned, studying the data. There's something else, she murmured, more to herself than to him. The radiation, it interacted with the Xylosian contract. Your DNA, it's changed. Suddenly, a wave of emotion washed over him, not his own. Vea relief gratitude, and something deeper, something akin to love. It was Lita's emotions, raw and unfiltered, flooding his senses. He gasped, clutching his head. What was that? Lita's eyes widened, her expression a mixture of shock and understanding. The changes? You can feel me, can't you? My thoughts, my emotions. He nodded slowly, his mind blown. It's overwhelming. He focused on her face, trying to filter out the noise. But I understand. I understand how grateful you are, how scared you were. News of Nolan's heroism spread like wildfire through the palace. Servants whispered his name with reverence. Courtiers offered respectful nods. Even those who had initially opposed his presence now regarded him with a mixture of awe and suspicion. He was no longer just a human, an outsider. He was a hero, a savior, and something more, something connected to their Empress. Later, after a long, restless sleep, Nolan found Lita waiting for him in his private quarters. The room was softly lit, the air filled with the gentle scent of Iridian blossoms. She stood by the window, gazing out at the sprawling cityscape, her silhouette framed against the twilight sky. He approached her cautiously, his heart pounding in his chest. He could feel her emotions, a gentle warmth that drew him closer. "Lita," he said softly. She turned, her eyes filled with a mixture of sadness and longing. "Nolan," she whispered. She hesitated, then stepped into his arms. Their embrace was tentative at first, then grew more passionate, more desperate. He kissed her, his lips finding hers with a hunger he hadn't known he possessed. She responded in kind, her body melting against his, her emotions swirling around him, a symphony of desire and gratitude. They moved to the bed, their movements slow and deliberate, each touch a testament to their growing connection. The act was both tender and passionate, a merging of bodies and soul. As they reached their climax, a wave of energy pulsed through the room, a visible manifestation of their bond. In the palace corridors outside, several members of the palace staff paused, their eyes drawn to the soft, shimmering light emanating from Nolan's quarters. They gasped, whispering amongst themselves, "The Empress and the human, they are truly bonded." The next morning, Varro approached Lita and Nolan with a somber expression. He held a data log in his hand, his fingers tracing the Iridian script. "Your Majesty," he said, his voice low, "we recovered this from Zelia's personal computer. It's heavily encrypted, but we managed to retrieve some of the data." Lita frowned. "What did you find?" "Communications," Varro replied grimly. "Encrypted communications with a high-ranking official within the Iridian government." Nolan felt a surge of anger from Lita, a burning rage that threatened to consume him. He reached for her hand, offering silent support. Varro continued, "The data log indicates that this official provided Zelia with critical intelligence and resources, enabling her to orchestrate the attacks on Theron and destabilize your reign." Lita's eyes narrowed, her voice dangerously soft. "Who is it, Varro? Who deceived me?" Varro paused, then met her gaze. "Counselor Goran, Your Majesty, your closest advisor and friend." Lita flinched as if hit, her face white with shock. "Goran? No. It can't be." Nolan felt a wave of disbelief from Lita, a refusal to accept the truth. He focused his newfound abilities, reaching out to Goran's emotional signature. He sensed a cold, calculating mind, a deep-seated resentment, and a flicker of fear. "It's true, Lita," Nolan said softly, his voice filled with conviction. "He's lying to you. He's been plotting against you from the beginning." Lita's face hardened, her grief replaced by a steely determination. "Take me to him," she said, her voice like ice. "I want to hear it from his own lips." They found Goran in his private chambers, surrounded by ancient Iridian texts and holographic displays. He greeted Lita with a warm smile, his eyes twinkling with intelligence. "Your Majesty," he said smoothly, "what an unexpected pleasure." "Spare me the pleasantries, Goran," Lita snapped, her voice devoid of warmth. "I know what you've done. I know you were working with Zelia." Goran's smile faltered, but he quickly recovered. "Your Majesty, you've been misled. Zelia was a rogue agent acting on her own. I had nothing to do with her schemes." Nolan stepped forward, his eyes fixed on Goran. He focused his psionic abilities, reaching into Goran's mind, probing for the truth. He saw images of secret meetings, encrypted communications, and a burning desire for power. He saw Goran's vision of a xenophobic Iridian empire, free from human influence. "He's lying, Lita," Nolan said, his voice resonating with newfound power. "He orchestrated the attacks on Theron. He wanted to seize power and establish a regime based on hatred and fear. Goran's eyes widened in alarm, his composure crumbling. "You can't prove anything," he stammered. "These are just baseless accusations." Suddenly, Goran lunged forward, a small energy pistol appearing in his hand. He aimed it at Lita, his face contorted with rage. "I should have eliminated you long ago, you weakling. You're a disgrace to the Iridian throne." Nolan reacted instantly, his newfound psionic abilities surging to the forefront. He focused his mind, disrupting Goran's movements, causing the pistol to fly from his grasp. Goran stumbled, clutching his head in pain. Before Goran could recover, palace guards swarmed into the room, seizing him and dragging him away. As Goran was led away, he turned to Lita, his eyes filled with venom. "You may think you've won, Your Majesty," he snarled, "but this is just the beginning. The Xylosians are aware of Nolan's enhanced abilities. They will not tolerate this interference with their contract. They are coming, and they will reclaim what is rightfully theirs." Lita stared after him, her face pale with dread. Nolan wrapped his arms around her, offering comfort and support. "What did he mean, Nolan?" she whispered, her voice trembling. "The Xylosians, what do they want?" Nolan looked into her eyes, his own filled with willpower. "Whatever they want, Lita," he said firmly, "we'll face it together. We'll protect our love, our family, our future." But as he spoke those words, a cold dread settled in his heart. The Xylosians were coming, and he had no idea how to fight a cosmic force that had already claimed a piece of his soul. Lita, shaken but resolute, stood before the assembled Iridian Senate. The grand hall, usually echoing with the dry pronouncements of political maneuvering, now held a palpable tension. Holographic displays flickered with images of Goran's treachery, his face a mask of cold ambition, even in defeat. "Senators," Lita's voice resonated, amplified yet carrying a tremor of raw emotion. "The actions of Goran were a betrayal not only of my trust, but of the very principles upon which our civilization is built. He sought to divide us, to sow discord and fear, but he has failed." She paused, her gaze sweeping across the faces of the senators, some still hesitant, others now radiating a newfound conviction. "I reaffirm my commitment to justice, to transparency, and to the burgeoning alliance between humanity and the Iridian people. An alliance built not on political expediency, but on mutual respect and understanding." The Senate, initially fractured by Goran's insidious influence, began to coalesce. Whispers subsided, replaced by murmurs of agreement. Many had witnessed Nolan's unwavering support for Lita, his genuine compassion for the Iridian people shining through despite his compromised memories. They saw not an outsider, but a protector, a friend. A hush fell over the hall as a ripple distorted the air, a spatial anomaly, announcing the arrival of the Xylosian delegation. 3 figures materialized, tall and gaunt, clad in obsidian robes that seemed to absorb the very light around them. Their faces were impassive, their eyes like chips of polished coal. The lead Xylosian raised a hand, and a synthesized voice, cold and devoid of inflection, echoed through the chamber. "Empress Lita, we have arrived to address the matter of Nolan Davis and the soul-binding contract. His enhanced psionic abilities, a direct consequence of the chronostasis procedure, constitute a breach of the agreement." Lita's spine straightened. "Nolan Davis is under my protection. He is a hero of the Iridian people. I will not surrender him." She invoked ancient Iridian laws of sanctuary, laws that predated even the Xylosian Empire, challenging their authority within Iridian space. By the ancient right of the Iridian throne, I declare sanctuary. The soul-binding contract holds no sway within these walls. Nolan, standing beside Lita, felt a surge of energy, a nascent psionic ability awakening within him. He reached out, focusing his mind, and established a direct telepathic link with the Xylosian leader. I wish to speak with you, not as a subject of your contract, but as one being to another. The Xylosian leader paused, its emotionless face betraying nothing. You presume much, human, but I will listen. Nolan poured his memories, his emotions, into the telepathic exchange. He showed the Xylosian leader his love for Lita, his growing affection for Theron, the transformative power of his experiences on Iridia. He shared the pain of his lost memories, the joy of discovering new strengths, the unwavering commitment he felt to protect his new family. The Xylosian leader remained silent for a long moment. Then, its synthesized voice echoed in Nolan's mind. Intriguing. Such connections are not factored into our calculations. We grant you a limited time, 1 Iridian solar cycle, to prove that the contract no longer applies. If you fail, the terms will be enforced. Lita and Nolan, with the help of Iridian scholars and scientists, delved into the labyrinthine complexities of Xylosian law. They pored over ancient texts, holographic records, and forgotten codices, searching for a loophole, a technicality, anything that could save Nolan. Finally, they found it. A passage almost overlooked that spoke of the nature of identity and the definition of a soul. The agreement, they argued, pertained to the entity Nolan was at the time of the signing, not the person he had become. His love, his memories, his new identity, they constituted a new soul, qualitatively different from what was bartered. They presented their findings to the Xylosian delegation, a tense and formal affair held in the Senate chamber. Lita spoke with the authority of an empress, Nolan with the conviction of a man fighting for his life and his love. Then Theron stepped forward. Now a young boy, recovering fully from his illness, he possessed his own unique psionic abilities, a gift perhaps enhanced by the chronostasis and his profound connection to Nolan. He reached out, his mind touching the Xylosian leader's, a pure and innocent voice, echoing in its thoughts. Nolan is good. He is my friend. He is family. The Xylosian delegation remained impassive, their faces unreadable. But within the mind of their leader, a subtle shift occurred, a flicker of something akin to understanding, perhaps even compassion. The lead Xylosian spoke, its synthesized voice still cold, but with a hint of something new, something almost thoughtful. We have reviewed your evidence. We have considered the arguments presented, and we have reassessed our position. A collective gasp swept through the Senate. The soul-binding contract as it pertains to Nolan Davis is hereby nullified. Relief washed over Lita and Nolan, a wave of pure joy that banished the lingering shadow of the Xylosian contract. They had won. Love had triumphed over ancient law. The Xylosian leader acknowledged them, its voice resonating with a newfound respect. Your sacrifice, human, has created something more valuable than what was lost, a bridge between two species, a testament to the enduring power of love and compassion. Perhaps, in time, we too will learn to value such things. Lita and Nolan, relieved and triumphant, turned to each other, their eyes locking in a silent vow of love and commitment. The shadow of the Xylosian contract was gone, replaced by the bright promise of a future together. Years later, Nolan and Lita ruled side by side, fostering a new era of understanding and cooperation between humans and Iridians. They established schools and cultural exchange programs, promoting empathy and breaking down barriers. Theron, growing into a wise and compassionate leader, served as a living symbol of their shared future, a testament to the transformative power of love and acceptance. The final scene depicted Nolan and Lita standing together, hand in hand, overlooking the Iridian capital. The city sparkled beneath the alien sky, a testament to their shared vision. Their love radiated outwards, a beacon of hope in a vast and uncertain galaxy, proving that even the most ancient laws could be rewritten by the power of the human heart.